if you want to be a prompt engineer, then this video is for you, because in this video, I'll show you the techniques of creating a good prompt. There's a 4-step process or a 4-step workflow you can follow to get better at the art of prompt engineering, because creating good prompts is more of an art. So here's the workflow. You try something, and then you measure how close you are to an outcome. And then you learn from what went well and what could have been better, and then you repeat this cycle. So this try, measure, learn, and repeat, these are the 4 steps that any prompt engineer can take to get better at prompt engineering. So let's discuss these steps in detail. The first step is try. Prompt engineering is a lot like hacking into a system or detective work. There's a lot of trial and error involved. So as a prompt engineer, you have to get used to trying a lot of things. But before you can try, you need to know what you're trying to achieve, right? So an ideal outcome is defined, and then a process of iterations begins to reach that ideal outcome. Whatever you try, something will work, something will not work. And for every step you try, keep documenting the steps and the results. And what you do with these results, you got to measure them. So the second step is measure. So your first question should be, how can you measure results? Like, what's the parameter? A prompt engineer starts by defining a minimum acceptable outcome, or I like to call it a MAO. It's an acronym for minimum acceptable outcome. It is the minimum amount of stuff that needs to happen so that you can say, hey, I've reached a certain milestone, or I have achieved my first victory. Once you have achieved your first MAO, the third step begins, learn. In the third step, the prompt engineer analyzes where we are, where we need to go, what went well, what needs to be done better. And using all of this knowledge, the prompt engineer then creates another minimum acceptable outcome, or another MAO. Using all of this knowledge, the fourth step is you start trying things again to achieve the new MAO. And the cycle continues till the ideal outcome is achieved. So let's see these 4 steps in action using this scenario. Let's say you are a hacker, and here's a 4-digit code that you need to break. You also know that each digit is between 0 to 9, and in this case, the ideal outcome is that you found all 4 digits. Let me ask you this. What's the minimum acceptable outcome to start with? And if you're wondering what's a minimum acceptable outcome, it would be your first victory in this mission. Think of it as an outcome which you can show to your hacker boss and get a pat on the back instead of a whack on the head. You create your first minimum acceptable outcome, which is you found 1 digit, and then you start trying each number from 0 to 9. One of these numbers will activate this cell and it will turn green. And that, my friend, is your first victory. That means you've achieved your first minimum acceptable outcome, your first MAO, completed. So if you wish, you can celebrate a bit and do a bit of moonwalk, but the mission will be incomplete till you find all the digits. So you start to create another minimum acceptable outcome, which would be to find the second digit. And then you start trying numbers from 0 to 9. One of them is going to work. You will get your second victory. You may want to do a moonwalk, but then this process continues till you get all the 4 digits. That's your ideal outcome. Prompt engineering is a lot like this. A prompt engineer will have an ideal outcome. So the process begins by defining a minimum acceptable outcome, or a MAO, and then the prompt engineer tries a couple of things, tries a couple of words, a combination of commands, data, context, and every time it communicates the information to ChatGPT, it gets a result, and then it measures the results. The prompt engineer sees how close is the prompt engineer to the MAO. And then based on the measurements, the prompt engineer learns what's working and what's not working. Then another MAO is defined, and the prompt engineer starts trying things again. And then this process goes on and on until the ideal outcome is achieved. And here's the thing, for every query, the ChatGPT API costs you or your company money if you're a prompt engineer. So this is why it is important to learn the art of writing good prompts. How do you communicate effectively with an AI? This lets the prompt engineer find the ideal outcome with less steps, and it saves time, effort, and money for the company as well as the prompt engineer. So here's a quick recap. There's a 4-step workflow in prompt engineering that you can start to use to get better at creating prompts. The 4 steps are try, measure, learn, and repeat. Comparing the job of a prompt engineer with other professions, just like a programmer creates code by trial and error and continues refactoring till the software comes to a minimum viable product. Just like a writer keeps writing many drafts before the final version or a minimum acceptable version is achieved, the writer keeps writing. A songwriter continues to experiment, come up with new tunes, new lyrics, and iterates with many versions of a song before minimum acceptable tune is achieved. In the same way, a prompt engineer continues to experiment and refine the prompts till the desired output is achieved. And at that point, my friends, the prompt engineer saves the prompt somewhere in a database for later retrieval by the prompt engineer or the team members. There are many different aspects to it, but this was a simplified workflow that you can start using now to sharpen your prompt engineering skills. Thank you for watching, my friends. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you